Hello and thank you for joining me on this short video, Export Health Certificates. Now my name's Andy Bowles and I'm a food lawyer. Now this is the 73rd in a series of 100 short videos that I'm recording on UK food law topics. You may be watching this as part of our online training service, in which case you'll have access to a whole range of additional resources, including webinars and videos and online training courses. But if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, you are of course very welcome. Now I'm going to be talking about health certificates that are required for the export of certain foods. Now, in order to determine whether an export certificate is required, you need to think about what sort of food you're going to be exporting. So foods can generally fall into two main categories. Now I'm excluding live animals from this, I'm just talking about food. So we're talking about things like products of animal origin and foods not of animal origin. Now products of animal origin will include obviously meat, fish, dairy, eggs, honey, and a whole range of other bits of animals, if you like, you might be exporting. Foods not of animal origin will be your sort of herbs and spices, soft drinks, alcoholic drinks, cereals, anything that is not of animal origin. Now typically, if you're going to be exporting a product of animal origin from Great Britain to somewhere else in the world, you will need some form of export health certificate. Now you need to think though, where are you exporting to? And there are two general rules here. If you're exporting to the EU, one set of rules will apply. If you're exporting to countries outside of the EU, then there may be other rules that apply. Now I'm not including Northern Ireland within this because we're not talking about movement. If you're moving certain goods from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, then separate rules will apply. But it's not an export because of course Northern Ireland is within the United Kingdom, but it has a special relationship with the EU which require under certain circumstances special rules to apply. But I'm not going to talk about them in this particular video. I'm going to talk about export of products of animal origin to EU and to non-EU countries. So what are the certificates that might be required? Well, you have a whole range of them, but the most common is the Export Health Certificate, and that's what I'm going to be talking mostly about. There are different forms of that. It may be you need an Export Health Certificate to send your product of animal origin, your meat or fish or dairy, whatever, to a country, or it might be you're using a transit health certificate because you're using, the food isn't actually going to that country, it's going through that country to get somewhere else. Attestations, support attestations. There are circumstances where health certificates can be issued for a whole bunch of foods being sent together. Under those circumstances, it may be necessary for individual attestations to be signed off to demonstrate that the food meets the requirements of food law, so that the person signing the export health certificate can just sign one certificate to cover all the foods. Phytosanitary certificates will apply to plants and plant materials. There is some, so things like flowers and bulbs and things like that, but there is some crossover with food. So obviously there might be seeds, there might be seedling plants and things of that nature. So they may require a separate phytosanitary certificate. Certificate of free sale, typically that's something that you would apply for if you're sending products to non-EU countries. It's generally a certificate to demonstrate the food is safe, it's free from any radioactive materials and things of that nature. It's the Rural Payments Agency that actually deal with that. We've then got processing statements and storage documents. These are typically used for fish. So if you're exporting fish, for example, you may need to, if it's fish that's come from a non-UK source, so it's being brought in from a third country and then it's being re-exported, you may need to demonstrate that it's gone through any processing, through a processing statement. You may need to demonstrate where it's been stored, if it's been stored for over a specified time period. Okay, well I'm going to focus on the Export Health Certificate because that's really what I'm talking about in this brief video. So if you're going to be exporting, for example, a product of animal origin to the EU, then you are going to need an Export Health Certificate. Now, these are available online. There is the EHC online service. I will show you where you can get that in a moment. So the actual certificate. In terms of the certification, you need to apply to specific professionals within Great Britain who can do that. Now, actually, I'm talking about Great Britain. I'm going to break it down further. I'm going to refer to England because there are separate lists for each of the countries that make up Great Britain, for Wales and Scotland. So we've got a health certificate must accompany any exports of relevant products of animal origin, and it needs to be signed off by a specified and authorised certifying officer. The certifying officers could be an official veterinarian. The food competence certifying officer is typically an environmental health officer, but they have to be properly authorised and listed. It can't just be anyone signs these. Now, the official veterinarians might include official veterinarians working in private practice, and some veterinary surgeons around the country, so veterinary practices, will offer this service to businesses. But the food competent certifying officers are typically within local authorities, and because they're environmental health officers, they're typically within the district councils, of course, London boroughs and metropolitans. So you'll need to get a certificate signed off. You'll need to find someone to sign it. Where do you find someone to sign it? There is this website on the www.gov.uk website. You can just Google this. Professionals who can certify export health certificates. On this little portal, you can identify which part of Great Britain you're in, so it divides the country up into east of England, south of England, whatever, and then you can click on that and it will identify the local authorities and the private practices that are authorised for signing off certificates. It will also specify what sorts of products they can sign certificates for. If you're looking for a certificate itself, you can find that on the gov.uk website. So it's just find an export health certificate. What you would do is you type into the search engine on this little website the nature of the food. So for example, it's fish and the destination country. If you're sending fish to the EU, it will then come up with a pro forma certificate. If you're sending a product of animal origin to a country and you search on here and it doesn't list, then you need to approach the AFA, which is a department in DEFRA, who are responsible for this area of work. But the contact details are available on this website. So export health certificates, typically if you get an export health certificate, you've got the pro forma from the website, you contact the professional to sign it. Typically the professional will need to actually look at and perform a physical inspection of the goods before they're exported. There are some exceptions to this. There are provision for groupage, so where you have several foods within a load, each supported by a support attestation, remember I talked about those earlier, then the physical inspection might only be of the one load rather than having to go off to each individual premises. There is also the logistics hub scheme where it might be appropriate, especially if you're a small business, for you to contact a logistic hub. They may arrange to collect your food to bring it to a central point where they have a professional available to sign off of the relevant certification. So it all goes together. It's a very easy way, cost-effective way of arranging for exports of foods. If you're exporting to a non-EU country, the key thing to do as a food business operator is to contact that third country to find out what their export arrangements are. Because if you're exporting food to the European Union, we know pretty much what the arrangement will be, because up until recently the UK was part of the European Union. So the export arrangements to the EU were identical to the import arrangements that we would normally have with it, well, previously had within the UK. So in other words, you need an export health certificate signed off. You need to fill in for exporting to the European Union. You'll need to go onto the Traces website and be registered with Traces, which is the European Union's online service, where you can create the first part of a common health entry document. What you do is you identify the product, where it's going, which port of entry and all those sorts of things, and the place of destination. That's all done online. You upload your duly authorised certificate, and at the port of entry, you present the physical certificate as well as the goods, as well as having all the pre-notification used through Traces. And what the officers will do at the border control post within the European Union is they will validate the a common health entry document, and they will produce a document. They'll retain the health certificate at the port, but they'll give the business operator, the person responsible for the consignment in the EU, a physical copy of the common health entry document, and that will accompany it to the first destination inland. So if you're going to a third country, they may have a similar provision, but often they won't. Some countries around the world, they don't really want health certificates. They just want a letter from the local authority just to confirm the business is in with their area and is subject to regular inspection. So it may be it's just an endorsement from the local authority. It may be they have their own pro forma health certificate that they want you to fill in. It's really important before you contact the health professionals, before you contact your local authority, that you find out what are the export arrangements to that third country. How can you do that? You can contact the embassy. So if you want to export a product to Peru, then you can contact the Peruvian embassy. Again, it's on the gov.uk website. Just search on there for foreign embassies in the UK. They'll give you the contact details. They may say, we just want a letter from the local authority to confirm that you're complying with food law. Or they might say, no, you have to get a health certificate signed off, and this is the format of the certificate. You'll be given that information. There is some information already for known procedures. So you might be that actually already we know what the export procedures are. So go again on the gov.uk website, you can look at exporting country guides. So for example, if you're exporting to a country in Asia, click on the list. If the country's on there, it will tell you what you need to do, what documents you require, and how you go about exporting to that particular country. Okay, right, well, thank you very much for listening to that. That's one out of 100 short videos that I'm recording on these topics. I hope you'll join me on the next one. Thank you for listening.